Do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, hello. Thanks for having me today. My name's Peter Jewett. I run two companies. The first is Bytes.co. We're a Burlington area website agency. So we build, design, and develop websites, primarily WordPress and Magento. And then we're doing some Shopify. We do website hosting and support, and we do digital marketing. And then our other company is Accessible Web, and that's a startup we've been building up over the last year or so. And Accessible Web focuses on web accessibility, so helping clients to make their websites ADA compliant. Many people don't know that's a legal requirement for most businesses, so we help on that front. So basically a couple of website related businesses.
Awesome. Tim?
Good morning, everyone. I'm Tim Volk. It's great to be here with you. I am a lifelong marketer and communications advisor. I owned and operated an ad agency in Burlington, Vermont, Kelleher Sametz Volk, until last year when we sold it to employees. And today I serve as a marketing advisor and coach to a number of Vermont and other organizations. Good to be here, and I'm looking forward to your questions.
And is Sam here? Maybe not. Looks like Sam hasn't arrived yet, but Sam Roach-Gerber will be joining us from VSET, and her background is in communications, business development. But in the meantime, I can help answer questions and step in her place until she arrives. But does anybody have any questions outright about these? Be able to really answer? If not, I can get the ball rolling with some questions. No. All right. Well,
excuse me. My name is Miles Dean. I represent Holistic Returns in the United States. And one of the questions I have is, when it comes to website development and things like that, I've been working many years in Europe, and I'm representing a couple of clients that want to come to the United States. And this thing with there's two things. There's one having to do with the VAT taxes that are regulated in each member state and how that is done through a web shop. That's a really technical question. The other one is how the marketing strategy needs to be set up for if we want to point out a particular region, like if we want to just focus on Vermont, what are the things that are the common denominators for the Vermont online shopper? The first one you can skip because it's too detailed. The second one we'll just focus on consumer behavior on online. Has it changed because of COVID?
Just Pete, why don't you start?
Okay. So I'd say for the first question around tax compliance in various regions, there's a lot of companies out there that offer this service as software. So one I just looked up that we've used before is TaxJar. I'm not sure if they work in Europe and in the United States, but this is a pretty common thing with e-commerce shops that operate in the US, and some states, some municipalities have their own sales tax laws. So I'd imagine you can find something that works internationally, and most likely it's a plugin that would, plug into Shopify or WooCommerce or Magento, and it kind of automates the sales tax collection, the reporting, to really make it easy so that you're not trying to manually, audit yourself, I guess, at the end of the year and figure out who has to get paid what amounts of tax, and to make sure you collect it, probably more importantly. In terms of marketing to different areas, one thing that we found is pretty effective is Google Ads. With Google Ads or Facebook ads, really any online ad platform, you can target geographically. So Google changed their algorithm a little bit, probably a year or so ago, so that if you are a business in Vermont, let's say you're a restaurant in Vermont and you want to show up for steak dinner, Burlington, Vermont, you can run Google Ads with Vermont as your location where the ads are targeted. You can also target Chittenden County because maybe people are willing to travel 20 miles to go out to a fancy dinner in the city. You could also target just Burlington. And the interesting thing Google implemented a year or so ago is that they used to just do targeting based on your IP address, based on the location that the person was searching. But now they're also looking for intent. So even if somebody is in Florida, maybe they're planning a trip up here for graduation or something like that. If they search for steak dinner, Burlington, Vermont, even if they're not physically located here, by putting that intent into their search, those ads will also target. And then what you can do is, set up different campaigns in Google Ads so that if you're a bigger business and you're trying to, target nationally, for example, you can set up region by region, as hyper focused as you want. And maybe you want to set up some different ad text. Maybe if you have multiple locations, you can set up different Google local extensions. So really any digital ad platform at this point would be where I'd start with that. And there's also a lot of SEO stuff you could do, building landing pages, for example. You'll see that on a lot of bigger retailers having landing pages, that are targeted for, tire shop in Burlington, Vermont, or tire shop in, Auburn, Maine. So setting up different pages on your website can also be an effective strategy. Great question.
Miles, I was just going to reinforce Pete's point about other platforms. So this works as well for Facebook and Instagram. So one of the things you want to think about is what might be the right platform for that particular business.
Thank you very much.
And it looks like we have Sam here now. Hi, Sam. Can you introduce yourself?
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Hello?
We can hear you.
Sorry about that. I think it cut out there for a second.
I have another question while we're waiting.
Go
I'm a
for it.
person that likes asking questions, so this is my day. Okay, now one of my clients is looking to partner with a contract manufacturer in New England. I'm based out of New Hampshire, but I'm not just looking. I'm originally from Vermont, so how do I use the BBB and the chamber in Vermont in order to tie up to these types of manufacturers, contract manufacturers?
Miles, can you be a little more specific about the category that needs assembly?
Yeah, infrared technology.
Okay, thank you. Aaron, that might be more of a question for the Chamber or the Better Business Bureau, unless Sam has some ideas.
Miles, if this is Kathy Davis with the Chamber, if you can shoot us your contact information, we will check with a couple of the contract manufacturers in Vermont and can connect you to them. Just send us your information. My email is Kathy with a C at Vermont.org, and just a little bit on what you're looking for, and we'll do those connections for you. Always feel welcome to reach out on that kind of thing.
Okay, well, thank you very much.
And just to chime in quickly, BBB.org, especially for those of you that weren't here at the start to hear our little BBB 101 intro, is such a huge resource tool for people with over 6 million businesses right within that database on BBB.org. And there are businesses in any type of industry that you can imagine. I think for a long time, people thought of the Better Business Bureau, for the roofers and the contractors and the plumbers and the auto mechanics. But we really do have information on every type of business and every type of industry. And if there's information that you can't find directly on bbb.org, you can always contact our office and we will point you in the appropriate direction of which agency or organization or business may be able to better serve you. And sometimes that's the chamber, sometimes that's the Attorney General's office, whatever it might be. But there's a lot of information right directly on bbb.org. And I can type our phone number and email address into the chat box for people as well.
Sam, are you in a good spot to introduce yourself?
I sure am. I'm so sorry about that extremely awkward and tardy introduction. So thanks for bearing with me, everyone. I'm Sam Roach-Gerber. I'm the Vice President at Vermont Center for Emerging Technologies, and we help entrepreneurs start and scale their businesses. We invest primarily in tech businesses, but we'll help any entrepreneur in the state regardless of sort of what stage they're at or what type of business that they have. And I think my passion personally lies in helping them sort of get clarity around what to do next. So I think entrepreneurship can be really overwhelming, especially when you're a solo entrepreneur or just starting out. So helping them sort of narrow down the field, like, okay, what needs to be taken care of next and how do I get there is where my passion lies. And sorry, I missed other intros, so definitely let me know if there's anything else you wanted me to add there.
That's perfect.
Great.
Any other questions? No, I have one. I have one for Peter, actually. So as you're with your new company, Accessible Web, I wanted you to potentially give us some ideas of what we need to consider when we're making our website more user-friendly and ADA compliant.
Okay. So web accessibility is a little bit complicated. I'll try to make this semi-brief, but essentially what's happened since 2006 is a series of court cases where the courts in the United States have expanded the scope of the Americans with Disabilities Act, the ADA, specifically Title III under the ADA, to include websites. So Target was the first company that got sued. They got sued by a person that was blind because that person could not transact on their website. Target tried to fight it in court. It ended up getting run up through the courts to a pretty high level. I don't know exactly what level, but the verdict was that Target had to make their website accessible because that judge deemed that the ADA applied to websites. Title III says that people all should have equal access to access your goods or services. So that court case said that if you have a physical location in a state, your website needs to be accessible to people in those states. Netflix was the next big company that got sued. Netflix obviously doesn't have physical locations, but in that case, the judge said, look, Netflix is a public accommodation in this, internet centric world we live in. People with a disability have the right to use Netflix. And so that particular one was around closed captioning. And so it was a person that was deaf that sued Netflix along with the American Federation of the Deaf. And they deemed that websites needed to be accessible even if they don't have physical locations. So what's happened is we're in this weird spot where under Obama, the Department of Justice was starting to offer guidance saying what levels of accessibility you had to reach. But the Department of Justice under Trump hasn't maintained those. So where we're at right now is there's a lot of lawyers out there that know that by court precedent, websites need to be accessible. And there's a lot of business owners that don't know this. And so what the lawyers do is they partner up with somebody with a disability, normally a person that's blind, and they mail letters out saying, we have a person here that can't use your website and we are going to bring you to court and sue you under the ADA unless you agree to pay this settlement and upgrade your website's accessibility. And so these letters arrive and most business owners are caught unaware. There's another agency in town I was talking to about it, and they went to a boat show. They had a client that was a boat manufacturer. They went out to Las Vegas for the big national boat show. All the manufacturers are there. Everyone's feeling good, coming home with their leads, and they're ready to do business. And that next week, every boat manufacturer that attended that show received a letter from the same law firm. So call it, on one hand, you could call this kind of trolling and similar to like patent trolls, where people are just, law firms are printing letters. They've realized this is a way for them to make a pretty good amount of money very rapidly. But on the other hand, people with disabilities, really feel like, as they should, the internet is a place where they should be included, the same as, the ADA applies to physical locations. So, there's two sides to the coin, but what we're really trying to do with Accessible Web is make businesses aware that this is a requirement. It's a little bit difficult because you never know when that letter might arrive, and it may not arrive. But we're kind of looking at it as, with this new incoming administration, most likely, or I shouldn't say most likely, but there's a good chance that this will actually get codified in law. And there was just a bill in Congress that didn't quite make it through, that was trying to codify this and set standards. And so how do you make your website accessible is the next question. What we're trying to do is make a website that works with a screen reader for someone that might be blind, or someone that might not have use of their hands, like maybe they have Parkinson's or tremors and they can't use a mouse. They should be able to keyboard navigate through a website. So you should be able to hit tab and move through a website and enter to hit a link. Someone that's paralyzed might use a SIP puff tube that's basically a modified keyboard. They might puff when they want to tab, and then SIP when they want to hit enter, and they can navigate that way. And it's important not to think about this for just people with disabilities. Think about all of us as temporarily abled. As we get older, vision's going to degrade. Anyone that lives long enough is going to end up with some sort of disability at some point. So, we really think of this as making websites for everyone, just making websites that are universally accessible. And for people that do have a disability, it makes a big difference. So what we do is, at Accessible Web, we work with clients to upgrade their websites to meet a set of standards called the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines, WCAG. And that set of standards is the universal language that browsers and assistive technology use. And if we can build your website to use that, we can have seamless communication. So we offer website builds from the ground up if you're thinking about a new website. And then the other path is, if you have a website that's newish or a web application, we do audits where we test a website or web app against WCAG standards, including having people with disabilities do real user testing. We always want to make sure that we're including the community in this, so that we can really verify we're really making significant upgrades to a website or web app. But essentially, we offer services around upgrading websites to meet WCAG and helping our clients maintain their websites and web apps to meet WCAG. And if you hit WCAG AA standards, then that covers you for ADA compliance. And there's other laws as well around federal procurement, and there's a lot to it. So I'll I guess end here.
Looks like Ryan Munn has a question.
Yeah, just curious for like smaller businesses and startups that might use something like Square to get their first page up and running. Is this something that Square is taking on that those folks don't need to be concerned with, or that they're too small to be worried about? Or should those folks be reaching out to you and thinking about the next step for their website with this in mind?
Really, everyone should be thinking about this. There's no limit to like the size of a business. So, it's something you should really be thinking about. And if you think about it from the ground up, a lot of times I compare it to mobile, right? Like in 2012 or so, Google came out and said, we're not going to rank websites on Google that aren't mobile friendly anymore for mobile searches. And at that point, everyone in the industry had to figure out how to take these desktop only websites and make them mobile friendly. And some agencies made a commitment, or some web companies made a commitment to do it right, and they kind of got ahead of the curve. And for other companies, they decided to use everyone remembers those mobile websites that would show up and they had the big buttons and they were only had half the content on them. So it's very similar. So my point is that if you can get in a habit the same way of when you're building your website, thinking about mobile as part of that, thinking about accessibility as part of that, it's something you should just get in front of. So you said Square is an example. I'll use Shopify as an example. Shopify has done a really good job of making their debut theme. So when you install Shopify, you set up your first site, you usually have their default theme debut, and then you always, with a basic plan, need to use their default checkout. So Shopify has made their checkout accessible and are constantly improving it, and they've made their debut theme accessible. So most of these platforms, assuming they've caught up with this, Shopify is definitely one of the leaders in it. They're making their default accessible, and a lot of the companies that have SaaS applications that come to us, they want their default to be accessible. But then you, as the customer, at that point that you start, changing colors, uploading pictures, uploading video, at that point the responsibility falls on you. So in their mind, they can't possibly take on all the liability of everybody making customizations, and they want to obviously offer the ability to make customizations because that's what makes these website platforms unique and special and easy to use. But typically, I would say look at Square's accessibility policy. They probably have like a policy or statement in their footer. Read through that and see where their responsibility ends, and then just educate yourself as you pick up whatever they're offering and do the customizations on it.
And one follow-up question to that would be, to what extent then does a company that's worked with you to address these issues, how much of that takes the liability completely off of them and maybe puts it on you, or how much of that is still shared or solely on the client who's serving the website?
So we offer tools and services to make a website accessible, but ultimately it's the client's responsibility to implement those changes. So we have a variety of subscriptions on kind of our basic level. It's just our tools. So you can monitor your website and catch stuff like an image that might not have an alt tag. An alt tag is a way to describe image for a person using a screen reader that might not be able to see that photography or whatever it is. So we offer tools at our lowest level, and then at our premium level, we're really working with the client to monitor their website and make the tasks for developers. So we're not taking on the liability because the clients own their websites, and it's kind of a joke in the website agency world, website world in general, that as soon as you hand it off to a client, they're always going to find a way to break what you so painstakingly put into place. So you're going to be hard pressed to find anyone that's taking on the liability of clients themselves. But, we certainly offer tools. And if you work with us on an ongoing basis, and if you do the things we tell you to do, and if you are diligent in maintaining your accessibility, we will, stand behind you in court. And, in general, there's a very limited, small chance that you're going to run into any legal issues. But the responsibility is on the website owner to make sure they're, maintaining their website and building a website in a way that is accessible.
Thank you.
And Ryan, just as another tool, like, before you go to Peter and his team, if you just want like a quick gut check, yes or no, do I have issues? There's a couple different web tools out there where you can just kind of put your website in and it'll tell you. I don't know that off the top of my head, but I'm happy to help look it up. I know a graphic designer, Kumba Win Design, who's local, and she's very passionate about ADA compliance with graphic design. And she told me about one of the tools, so I can follow up with her and get that to you if that'd be helpful.
Yeah, there's a couple free ones. You can install a Wave Scanner Chrome extension. That's, just puts the icon on top and you can hit Wave Scanner and that will show you some issues. You can also in Chrome right click and open up your inspector tools. And at the top, you'll see Lighthouse. So Lighthouse offers a variety of page speed SEO tests. One of the options there is accessibility, and that will scan your website for accessibility issues. Those scanners are a great first step, but just be aware that the scanners at this point can only pick up 30 to 35% of actual WCAG success criteria. So just because you're at 0 errors doesn't mean that your site's fully accessible. It's a great place to start and get a snapshot of how you're looking. And it's a great way to pick off the low-hanging fruit, like Sam said, before you call us. And we actually, too, we offer a 20% discount on our audits and certifications if you come to us with 0 automated issues in Lighthouse. So, we love it when people do the work themselves first before coming to us, because it reduces, the automated test that we need to do.
Excellent. Thank you.
We have a paid search question in the chat box. So Champlain Fleet Club, which is the only membership motorboat club in the Lake Champlain, they're looking for some advice on how to improve search placement versus other boat dealers in the area.
Yeah, and Aaron, maybe I should just clarify just a little bit more. I want to make sure I'm getting the placement, but we're already doing a lot of the basics. We are doing paid search. We have Facebook advertising. We have Instagram advertising. My frustration comes in, I guess, in that sometimes when I'm searching, even from incognito, so it's a clean search basically, I'm seeing boat dealers come up and we're not getting placement on the first page or even sometimes the second page below the fold. So it's I'm just wondering how I can perfect this and really maybe get an evaluation to see what we might be missing in our approach.
I mean, I would say there's two things that factor in how high you're going to show up. Really 3 pieces. There's how much you're bidding on those keywords. So let's say you're bidding on Lake Champlain Marina, right? Or something like that. Motorboats, Lake Champlain. If you're bidding on those terms, the number one thing is how much you're bidding. If these boat manufacturers are bidding $10 a click and you're bidding $2 a click, you're just never going to show up, because you need to be competitive. That's how Google makes all their money. Is AdWords is Google Ads is an auction platform. So number one, make sure you're bidding competitively, and in the back end of Google Ads, you can see based on your bid what their estimated placement is for you. The second piece is your daily budget. This comes up a lot. If you're spending, let's say you're spending $600 a month, which breaks down to like $20 a day. And let's say your clicks are $5 each that you're paying. That's only 4 clicks a day. So depending on what your budget looks like in comparison to the overall search volume, what's happening is you might just not be paying enough money. You might be showing up 4 times a day, and Google Ads has a couple settings. You can either say, send my ads every time until I deplete my budget for the day. Or you can say programmatically figure out how to distribute my ad impressions based on traffic over the day, in which case they'll try to make it last the whole day. But in either case, if you don't have a sufficient budget, you're still not going to see yourself showing up that much, just because people with bigger budgets are going to be owning that spot. And then the third thing that a lot of people don't know about is quality score. So make sure that the landing page that you're dropping someone on from those Google ads is relevant for the term. So a lot of times people will try to just land their Google ads on their homepage. We recommend making a few different landing pages that are really hyper relevant for that keyword or ad group that you're running. So you could set up under your campaign multiple ad groups. Each ad group has a general focus keyword, and each ad group has its own landing page. And if you can have a landing page that has a higher quality score for a keyword than your competitors do, so this is where you might have an advantage over boat manufacturers because you're located on Lake Champlain. If you're trying to show up for Lake Champlain and your site is more relevant or has more relevant landing pages, there's the potential that you can outrank your competitors, especially those manufacturers, by quality score, even if you're spending slightly less money per click. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that all makes sense. I appreciate it. I wasn't aware that there's a place where it can recommend the value per click through. So I know about the dollar spend per day, and I've played around with that and adjusted that to see what kind of results I get. But someplace on Google Ads, there's also a place where I can get a recommendation for what I should be spending on a per click basis?
Yeah, I mean, they're pretty good about trying to make you spend more money.
Yeah.
You know, like that's the business model, right? So they're always going to let you know if you're limited by budget per click or limited, you know, by your daily budget. So they're generally pretty good. And there's a lot of automation. We've been having a lot of luck with Google Ads automation recently. When you read the ads, they seem so dumb in the way they're like wording stuff. But I guess, you know, it's AI and the computers must know what they're doing. And we're not really sure why it's working as well as it works. But there's a lot of ways to just put your Google Ads on autopilot that seem to be really effective, even though on the surface it doesn't seem like it should be as effective as it is. So, I mean, if you want us to too, you can email me at peter@bytes.co and we can set up a time. We do free audits of people's Google Ad platforms as a way to kind of get our foot in the door. So feel free to reach out and we can take a look at how you have things configured and maybe make some recommendations.
Okay, thank you, Peter.
Hey, Philip, not to be a shill for Peter, you can tell by his response that this is pretty complex stuff. My experience is that it makes all the sense in the world not to DIY this, but to hire the experts. I run I do marketing for a couple of small luxury hotels, and I would never think of running the AdWords dashboard. I hire hospitality experts to do that. Just a thought.
Okay, thank you. That makes sense. Second question, actually, just to reach out to anyone on the call. This summer, we'll be looking for seasonal workforce, dock hands, basically, people working on, young people preferably, that can handle boats, working on the dock. So if anyone has someone in mind or a referral, we'd appreciate it.
Reach out to the ski resorts.
That's a good point. The chamber can help you with that as well. So at Talent BTV, we could advertise your openings on our website and also cross promote those to Burlington young professionals would be your key demographic for positions like that.
And I just wanted to also mention that you can post on the Better Business Bureau website as well. We have a portion of our website dedicated to businesses that are looking, that have job openings, essentially.
Okay, I'll be in touch with all of you. Thanks.
Any other questions? We have about 7 minutes left.
Yeah, this is Ryan again. Just to piggyback on that question, you know, AdWords is one piece of the advertising, but maybe you could speak a little bit to some of the benefits of content creation. It sounds like, you know, there might be some recreational content opportunity with that business. How could they maybe think about ways to leverage content to increase search relevance and increase their traffic that way?
Hey, Pete, let me start on that. So Ryan, as I mentioned a moment ago, I do some work with small luxury hotels, and in both instances, we're pretty faithful about creating a monthly blog post. And sometimes I think we're just screaming in an empty theater. But every time I ask my digital gurus whether people are landing on those pages, they in fact are, and we get thousands of hits to those pages. So there is some value. Obviously, that's sort of real value, but then there's the whole sort of digital value of kind of scoring for the right words and phrases. Pete, maybe you can add to that.
Yeah, we tend to take a pretty data-driven approach to content. With Google Ads, for example, you can see stuff around search volumes. And, you know, the goal here is getting a high volume keyword with low competition. So, you know, every time you add a word to a keyword, to a Google search, it's going to cut down on the volume. So you can use the Google Ads keyword suggester tool. That's a great place to start. Google Trends is also a great place to start. You can compare you can compare Ford, Hyundai, Chevrolet, and see what different seasonal trends are. You can look up skiing in Vermont versus hiking in Vermont and watch, you know, over 5 years, those kind of graphs cross. And you can also enter in kind of your core focus keyword for your business and Google Trends will tell you things that are emerging, kind of hot keywords that are related. So we always like to take a data-driven approach because, like Tim's saying, the goal is to have search volume coming in, and the number one thing is make sure you're writing about something that people are looking for. And then, I'd almost recommend taking it beyond just a blog post, and maybe creating like a content calendar where you're, coming up with these search terms based on Google Trends, and whether it's seasonal trends, whether it's external business trends, depending on what you're doing, come up with a content calendar and plan 3 months out so that you can have those posts ready for the day that it's going to be relevant. So you can maybe post them a day or two ahead of time. You'll be indexed on Google by the time that that event comes around. And then, always think of your web presence as kind of a hub and spoke model, where ideally your website is the hub, and then you have your different channels out on the web as your spokes. So it's going to be different for every business. Like a B2B infrared manufacturer probably isn't going to have a bunch of luck on Snapchat, right? But but depending on who your audience is and what your business is, certainly experiment with the different channels. And when you write a blog post, post that on Facebook with a link back to your blog. And you can set the open graph picture and a little excerpt, but try to always get people back to your website. And then, I'd recommend setting up like your Google Analytics with a remarketing configuration. And you can also set up your Facebook tracking pixel on your website. So the goal is, if you drive everyone back to your website, at that point, you can set a cookie on their machine for remarketing. And that's how it does a couple things. It can help you find lookalike audiences. So you can say, hey, Facebook, take all the people on my website and find people that look like them. Or you can say, hey, Facebook or Google, take all the people that have visited my website in the last 60 days and follow them around with display ads. So this is how, you buy a pair of shoes on Zappos and you're followed around by those sneakers for the next 2 weeks. And especially, it works especially well if you have a business with kind of a slower purchase cycle. There's certainly businesses that are kind of like impulse buys. Someone's drinking a beer at night on their computer and they're like, I need to have this awesome hooded sweatshirt. But, other stuff that might be, larger transactions or B2B transactions, that have a longer purchase cycle. Anytime you can drive back to your website and kind of get them into an audience pool and follow them around with ads, it's going to help you stay top of mind so that they think of you when it is time to make that purchase.
I think we have time for one more last question, and we have a question in the chat about trends after COVID. Do we think that we'll go back to window shopping, or are we going to stay primarily online, and maybe some marketing around those trends and how to address that?
I can start with this one. I think the key is to not let your e-commerce slip when people start going back to traditional retail. I think that will happen because I think most folks are going nuts and have sort of any excuse to leave their house. But the key is making sure that you maintain your inventory, keep your web up to date so that the folks that have been shopping online can continue to do so. And keeping all of that information up to date. So if your customer goes to your Instagram page, they should see accurate hours, accurate website, accurate, closing and opening times and all that good stuff, because you want to sort of meet your customer where they're at no matter what. So I think it will be a bit of a mix. I think there will definitely be people that are sticking to e-commerce, especially folks that are sort of high risk.
I serve on the board of a regional retailer. 2020 was the first year where we did more online than in store. We've got about 10 stores. I think that, no one knows really how we're going to behave post-COVID, but I think that what will emerge is there's been a trend in retail over the last 10 years or so for experiential retail, bricks and mortar. I think that's going to be even more so once we can all get out again and walk down Church Street.
I've been kind of personally amazed historically on how many Church Street businesses don't have good e-commerce presence, you know, that they just rely 100% on the storefront. So I certainly agree that there's, you know, I love Church Street. Our office is on Church Street. I really miss being able to just, you know, cruise around, right? And I think we all do, and are looking forward to getting back to that. But you know, I think the more channels you have, the better. You know, like if you can be online, a good online store is going to supplement your in-person shopping experience. Maybe someone's looking for a product they don't know you have, and they're doing a Google search, and you show up in the rankings, and that's what drives them into your physical location. And maybe, you know, they're shopping at your physical location while they're here, you know, for a trip to Vermont, and when they go back home, they just can't get your, you know, that product out of their mind that you had on that shelf, and they want to buy it. So, you know, we'd always encourage kind of the more channels, the better. You know, within reason. Obviously, there's an ROI to be thought about, but you know, I think there's a lot of businesses. We certainly saw a lot that came through the program for the Restart Vermont grants. We did, you know, probably 10 of those, and it was pretty notable. Some of these customers that said, look, I've never done e-commerce before today. And we realize now this is something we need to figure out. So hopefully, you know, people kind of stick with the online as we reopen, and then really take the opportunity to revisit their in-person experience as well, because the two really should dovetail each other.
Well, thank you, panelists, for helping to answer questions. If anybody has any lingering questions after today's event, I will be sending an email with all of our speakers' contact information so you can follow up. But I will pass things off to Amy, who will introduce our next presentation.